This video is intended for beginning Illustrator students who are new to the pen tool. Before I get started, I want to set up a few things to make the process more efficient. The first thing I'm going to do is click on the white selection tool, officially known as the direct selection tool, before clicking on the pen tool. With the pen tool selected, I can access either a white or black selection tool by holding down the Command key on a Mac. Whichever selection tool was used last is the one that will become available with the Command key. I find that the white selection tool is much more helpful when it comes to adjusting a pen path, so that's the one that I want. The second thing I want to do is make sure the fill color down here is set to none. If I don't, Illustrator will automatically fill the shape I'm drawing with the foreground color, which can obscure the template or reference photo I'm trying to follow. Let's talk about the templates a little bit. Each document in the series has a layer containing a template. It's on the bottom in the stacking order, and it's locked. I can click here on the eye icon to turn off the visibility of the entire layer. I can click on the lock icon to make the layer editable. But if I do that, I might accidentally move my template or start drawing on the wrong layer, so most of the time the template layer will stay locked. There are three different kinds of control points that can be created with the pen tool. The first is what I call a corner point, and it is the simplest to do. I create a corner point just by clicking once. What I'm seeing now is not an actual line, it is a preview of what the line might look like if I were to click again. What I'm doing now is holding down the Shift key, which constrains the placement of the next point to either horizontal, 45 degrees, or vertical in relation to the first point. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click again, just once, then move down and click again all the way around while holding down the Shift key. Notice when I get back to the beginning of the path, there is a little circle icon that appears at the lower right-hand corner of the pen tool. That means that I am hovering right over my very first point. If I click again, I will seal the path, creating a completely closed shape with no gaps in the line. There are easier ways to create a rectangle in Illustrator, and in the real world I certainly wouldn't do it this way. What I'm doing now is holding down the space bar, which is a keyboard shortcut for the hand tool. This allows me to quickly navigate around the page just by holding down the mouse and dragging. With this new shape I'm going to click, but notice when I hold down the Shift key, it won't let me place a new point in the proper place. This angle isn't horizontal, 45 degrees, or vertical, so for this particular shape, I'm not going to hold down the Shift key at all. I'm just going to click once in each spot, and again, once I get back to the beginning, I get the symbol that indicates I'm right over the first point, so I click to close the shape path. Now I'm going on to the second exercise, and this is where it gets a bit more tricky. The second kind of point I can create is a curve point. The blue line is the path I want to follow. These lines indicate where I will drag the handles in order to control the path. To create a curve point with handles, I will click, keep the mouse down, and drag. It's important to understand that this is not a line, it is merely a curve point with two control handles. Over to the middle point, click and drag in the direction the path is going. What I'm seeing is that this handle right here controls about half of this path, and this handle is controlling the other half of the path. As I move these handles around, it is almost as if they have gravity that pulls and twists the path. Notice what's happening here. See how the blue line is disappearing? The reason is because I didn't change the white fill color to none. I click here to solve the problem, and now I can see the template again. See that as I click on the last point and drag to the right to create a handle, there's a second handle coming out from the left side of the point that is exactly the same length. The two handles mirror each other. These handles work like a seesaw or teeter-totter. If one moves up, the other moves down. When you've finished with the path and want to disconnect to start a new path, hold down the Command key to access the white selection tool, then just click off the path. This new path is a little small, so I'm using the spacebar and Command key shortcut to access the zoom tool. I click and drag a marquee to tell Illustrator how much enlargement I want. The smaller the box, the more it zooms in. The star is where I start, so I click and drag to the left because that's the direction the path is going. Click on the second point and click and drag down a second time. If the path isn't accurate enough, I can access the white selection tool with the Command key and make adjustments. There's a danger in adjusting the path as you go along. In this example, my second click and drag was not very accurate. When I go to this handle to adjust it, I click just off the end of the handle rather than right on it. What I've effectively done is disconnect the path. Yes, I can click on the path again to access the handles and adjust them, but when I move to the third point to continue, the path doesn't continue as expected. Illustrator thinks I want a new path. If I find myself in this situation, I need to make this last point active with the white selection tool. Then, when I see a slash at the bottom right of the pen tool telling me I'm right on the point, I can click and drag to make this path active again. Inexperienced pen tool users often miss the handles and disconnect the path accidentally when trying to make adjustments as they go. If that's the case for you, then don't even try to make adjustments until you've placed all the points. Once the path is finished, I can activate the white selection tool directly from the tool palette. Now I can come back and fix my mistakes. If I happen to miss a handle, so what? I can just make the path active again and give it another shot. The goal is to see as little of the blue line as possible. Right now I'm giving you clues about where to put points and how far to drag handles, but you'll need to reach a point of understanding so that you can make those decisions for yourself. I'm starting at the red star with a click. Hold down the mouse and drag. Notice that the handle should be perfectly horizontal, so I can hold down the Shift key as I drag to constrain the handle to be absolutely level. Once again, I haven't created a line. I've made a single point that has two handles. Now I click and drag to the green point. My path is looking pretty good. Then up to this point, click and start to drag, holding down the Shift key after I start the drag. I make sure to let go of the mouse before I let go of the Shift key. Hold down the space bar and drag to scroll over. Click on this point and drag to the green dot. There seems to be a problem because if I stop at the green, the left handle isn't long enough to pull the path into the right spot. It appears that the one on the left needs to be longer than the one on the right. Following my own advice, I'm going to come back and fix that later. I move to the next point and click and drag. Here also, one handle is at the proper length and the other isn't. Move to the final point to click and drag to finish up with the pen tool. What's happening is the curves are different sizes, so when the left and right handles are the same length, they can only be right for one curve or the other, but not both. I can come in with the white selection tool and click on an existing point, or I can click on the path to make the curve handles active. I'm going to adjust this handle right here, but notice that this curve is fine just the way it is. If I move the left handle up or down, the right handle will also move and mess up my curve. So if I like what this curve over here is doing, my only option is to take the handle and make it longer or shorter, but I can't let it go up or down. So I select it, hold down the Shift key, and move it nice and straight. Now this path is just the way I want it. I can see that this one is the right length because it matches the template, but this one is too short. The left handle is fine, but this one needs to move to the right more. Next, I use the white selection tool to deselect the path so I can move on to the next one. Start at the star, click and drag. Move to the second point, click and drag. Notice the right handle is shorter, but the left handle needs to be longer. I'm going to fix it later. Move to the gold dot and click and drag to the red dot. Then click and drag over to here. Let's solve some issues. This is almost always going to be a problem. the handle for this point and the handle for this point are overlapping. This one is fine, but this one is too long. I grab it and push it down to the gray point. When these handles are very short, it's hard to control them, so I'm going to have better luck if I adjust the angle using this handle instead. This portion of the path isn't working well at all, so I adjust this handle to make it longer, which solves the problem rather nicely. Notice that all of these are just repetitions of this one. I'm trying to get you to have an understanding of how this works by doing it over and over again. In the real world, I would use a form of copy and paste to get this done, but I still want you to do all of them manually. We've experienced two of the different kinds of control points that you can create with the pen tool, the corner point and the curve point. And now we're going to talk about the third kind. Based on what we already know, I'm going to start here and click and drag up. I don't have to put a point there if I don't want to. I know that I can get that half circle by going with just 2 points, so click and drag down. This isn't perfect, but I know I can fix it later. So I'm going to come over here now, and am I going to click and drag up or click and drag down? Well, if I drag down, that doesn't work. If I drag up, that doesn't work either. So what we're seeing here is this handle is pulling this path down right here. So it doesn't matter which direction, which of these handles is up or down, it's going to pull this path up or down, but this is really only going to control about half of this curve right here. The issue is this one. I want this handle to go up. See, this handle right here is controlling this arc, but this handle is controlling this arc. What we need to do is we need to convert this to what I would call a hinge point. So rather than this being a teeter-totter where they work in tandem, they need to work separately like a hinge. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to hold down the Option key. Notice that gets me a different keyboard shortcut, and I'm going to grab the end point and drag it up here like this. So what we see now is that this handle is available to control this, and this handle is available to control this side over here. Now you want to be careful. You don't want to take both of these points and put them right on top of each other, because then it's difficult to select just one or the other of them. So we can work with both of these until we get the shape that we are comfortable with. And so I'm making my adjustments. Now, you may have noticed that a couple times I missed these handles. So what that means is, if I come over here and I try and click and drag to continue with the path, it's going to be disconnected. So hold down the Command key, make that last point active, get in it, I see the slash mark, I click and drag. Now I have to hold down the Option key so that I can break this. Now the general rule of thumb here is anytime you have an abrupt change of direction, you're going to need to break the handles to get this to work. All right, let's look at this one. Click, drag up, come over here, click, and drag down. I see that this is an abrupt change of direction, so I have to break this handle and just point it in the right direction. Now, I don't want it to go over here. This is a very common mistake that students make. All you need to do is just point this in the right direction. Now, when we get to this point, should I just click? Well, let's try just clicking. The problem with doing that is I now have only one handle to control this arc, and it's on this side. You do not get handles unless you click and drag. So what's going to happen, the better way to do this, click and drag up, click and drag down, hold down the Option key, break it, point it in the right direction, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click and drag. Now, I don't really need handles for this section right here, but I do need a handle for this section. So that's why I'm going to click and drag it up like so. All right. Now, a couple of mistakes that students typically will make here. Click and drag, hold down the Option key and break it. And then when they come over here, they click and drag and it's too far. So let me zoom in on this so you can see what the problem is. These two handles, so this handle right here goes to this point and this handle right here goes to that point, and they've crossed over. And I mentioned before that most of the time you don't want those handles to cross over. Now notice another thing here. Unless these handles are perfectly in line with the path that I want to make, this horizontal line, they're not going to be horizontal. So these need to be exactly in line with what we've got going here. So Option key, break it and put it up there. Did I miscommunicate it? Did I disconnect it? No, I didn't, so I'm in good shape. You can adjust them later on if you want to, or you can adjust them as you go along. So let's say you're a little bit worried that you're going to disconnect your path again. All right, well, let me just come over here and make sure I'm getting my points in the right place. Then I can come back and manually select under the Pen tool the Convert Anchor Point tool, which is what I call the hinge tool. So now I hold down the Command key to access my white selection tool, and then let go. It gets me back to the hinge. So I can come in and I can break these handles and get them to do what I want. If I happen to miss a handle, it's not a big deal. I can just click on the path to get it going again. Okay, now this one needs to point this direction, so you can see how this works. The Pen tool is a very powerful and flexible tool, but it is not easy to master. I'm making it look easy, but you have to understand that I've been doing this for 30 years. Let's look at this one. Start at the star, click, come over here, hold down the Shift key, click. Now here we want to click and drag. I do not need a handle over here, but I am going to need a handle over here. That's the reason why I do a click and drag. Now I can come in and drag down to here. Notice this is an abrupt change of direction, so I'm going to have to break the handle. So now I am holding down the Option key and I'm clicking right on the end. I do not put it up to here, I'm just going to put it up to there. Now this next section, because this is straight and this is straight, I don't need to click and drag, I just need to click. Now the general rule of thumb, so we're looking at this point right here, if the section before is straight and the section after is curved, then I'm going to click and drag. So if either the section before or after is curved, I'm going to click and drag. If the section before is curved and the section after is curved, I'm still going to click and drag. So I'm going to come over here, let's hold down the Shift key, click and drag. This is an abrupt change of direction. Okay, so you see that I'm a little bit off there and I've decided that I want to make some adjustments as I go along. Now I'm going to make a mistake on purpose here. I'm holding down the Option key and I'm grabbing this and I'm adjusting it to try and get it to match the way that I want. Well, you might be asking yourself, well, what is it that you did wrong? Well, the problem here is that I used the wrong keyboard shortcut to make the adjustment. I held down the Option key rather than, so the Option key, which got me the hinge tool, rather than the Command key, which was the white selection tool. So what I did is I broke this handle. So you can see a little bump here. That's going to be a problem because when we're looking at these nice smooth curves, when we see something like this, we notice that it isn't right. Now it's unfortunate that these two keys are right next to each other, the Option key and the Command key, but you need to make sure that you're making your adjustments while holding down the Command key and you're breaking handles while holding down the Option key. Don't make adjustments with the Option key held down. You're going to get little bumps like this, and that's going to cause you problems. Now you can use the same tool that caused the problem to fix the problem. So we held down the wrong key and we grabbed this handle and we broke it. So what we can do is hold down the Option key, come in here in the middle and click and drag to create a new teeter-totter. Don't make the mistake now of adjusting it with this same tool. You'll have the same problem you did before. This time hold down the Command key, then make your adjustments. Alright, let me walk you through a closed shape where I'm not giving you any hints as to what to do. This looks like a good starting point, so I'm going to click and drag down because the path is going in that direction. So as I'm looking at this, I'm wondering, well, let me see if perhaps I can get a point right here. And then I am going to adjust it as I go. Well, okay, I think I like that. Now, am I going to be able to get right over to here? Perhaps not. So I'm going to do one right there. Then I'm going to do another point right here. Now this is an abrupt change of direction. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and break this handle. You can also drag out from the point to get it done as well. Like so. Now at this point, I need to zoom in here. So I'm holding down the Command key and the spacebar. This is an abrupt change of direction, but the handle needs to be pretty short, so I am going to pull it out here. Now I don't want the handle to go past this point right here. Watch what happens when I do. See how it pulls the path back like that? So Command Z. I just want this handle to be pointing in the right direction. This section is straight and this section is straight, so I can just click. Now we'll zoom back out. Come over here, hold down the Shift key and click. Here I want to click and drag because even though this is straight, this is curved. So click and drag. Again, watching out that this handle does not get longer and go past this previous point. Now I'm going to break it. Now let's look at this. This is a symmetrical shape. So if I were to draw a line straight down the middle, the left side and the right side would be exactly the same. So where I put the points over here, if I got them to work, I'm going to do the same thing over here. So based on what I'm seeing here, I can certainly get this with just 2 points. So I click and drag up. I can come back and adjust this later. So Option, break that handle. Since I put a point over there, I'll put another point about right here, one here. Now this you have to be careful of because when we come back up, we see our round circle there that indicates that we're back at the beginning. If I just click and drag, see I have created a teeter-totter point there, and that's not what I want. So if I hold down the Option key while I click on that last point, then I will get a hinge point. So now I can come back in with my white selection tool and make the adjustments that I need to make to get this to be just right. So here, this one's too long. This one probably needs to be a little bit higher. This one needs to be a little bit lower. And we just kind of tweak it until we get it where we want it. Now there is an issue here to be concerned about. This sharp point here has to do with how the pen tool and how the lines handle corners. And depending on the angle that these come in, it's going to be a little bit sharper or a little bit less sharp. And the way that you can solve that problem is if you go to the stroke palette and you choose not the end cap but the corners. So we can click on it and that's going to round it off. You also have the option of doing that. I think I like the round one a little bit better. And we can go back and we can tweak this some more. But we've pretty much got this solved at this point. So any of these that you see over here that are symmetrical in their orientation, you're going to draw half of it. And then when you draw the other half, points are in the same place, handles are the same lengths. It's pretty much a mirror image of one another. Now sometimes I'll see students who maybe aren't real confident with the pen tool. They'll approach a shape like this by kind of going this way and putting in a lot of points. Now while that generally gets the shape that they're looking for, you can see how it's really raggedy. If you want a nice smooth curve, you really want the fewest number of points possible. So in a situation like this, I would say let's click click and drag just slightly. And if I want to be aggressive about this, I suspect that I can get this curve with just the 2 points. If it turns out that I'm a little over optimistic, I can always go back in and add more points later if I can't get it to work just the way that I want. But in this case, that looks like that's working fine. Now, if I did feel like I had to add some extra points, what you can do is, while this path is active, if you get right on it, there's a little plus there, and I don't know if you can see that or not. If I click right on this path, I've added another point. Now, if I draw my line and I say, you know what, I think I really do only need 2 of these, I can get my pen tool and go back on an existing point and click on it, and again, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a minus there, and that's going to get rid of that point. So holding down the Command key, I can grab this path and move it around like so, and I can also come in and do each individual handle to get just exactly what I'm after. Now, when you're faced with a shape like this that has a hole in it, what we're dealing with is a compound shape. So that means it has an outside surface and an inside surface, sort of like a donut. So to get something like this to work, you can't just draw the 2 paths. And here's the reason why. So if I were to select both of these and say, all right, I want to fill this up with a color, let's say it's that. See, they're both going to fill up with color. That isn't going to work for us. And you might say, oh, well, that's no problem. Let me just go ahead and select this shape and fill it up with white. All right, well, if we now have a shape that's underneath that, and we send that to the back, you can see that this is solid white. You can't really see through it. So what you need to do in a situation like this, you've got a couple of options. Option number 1 is to use the black selection tool and to select both of the shapes and say Object, Compound Path, Make. And then if we were to, let's give that a color, send it to the back. See, now you can see that it has punched a hole in it. If you want to get rid of something like this, you would select it, say Object, Compound Path, Release. Other thing that you can do with this is you can select both of these, and then you can go to your Pathfinder and use this one, which takes the shape that's in front and punches a hole in the shape that's underneath. So either way, it's going to get you the compound path that you're looking for here. Let's now address the issue of where we're going to put points, because that's kind of important. So click here, and I'm looking at this and saying, all right, well, gee, can I get all the way down to here with this? Doesn't really look like it. So what I'm going to do is say, let me click right here, and as I'm going along, at what point does this start to transition into a curve? Right about there. And then as I go around the curve, when does it transition back into straight? And that's right about there. So I'm coming down, same criteria. Where does it start to curve? Right about there. It's curving till we get to this point, so I can do a click and drag. It's an abrupt change of direction, so I'm going to hold down the Option key and either grab the handle right here or pull out from the center of the point. The transition to straight is right about there. So for the most part, you're looking for transition points. As it starts to curve, you put a point there. When it straightens out, you put a point right there. Now, based on what I just told you, you might think that to create this shape, you would have to start with a point here and then follow it around, and as it starts to straighten out, you would put another point here, and then so on. But looking at this one, you see that that's not the case. There's actually only 2 points between this one and this one. What's happening is this handle is going up and twisting the path up. This handle is twisting it down, and it just so happens that the force exerted on the path between those 2 handles makes this look fairly straight in between. So unfortunately, no matter what rules I give you, there's always going to be some situations where the guidelines don't apply, and this tends to be one of them. The ultimate goal is always going to be to create the path that you want with the fewest number of points possible. Not only so the path looks nice and smooth, but also if you're going to do shape-to-shape blends, the more points that you use, the more work it's going to be to move them all around. And we want to be as efficient with this as possible. The nice thing about learning the pen tool well is once you have a fair amount of mastery of it, there's not a lot you can't do in Illustrator as long as you have good reference material. Another thing as well is that the pen tool is incorporated into most of Adobe's software. It's very helpful to know it if you're working with Photoshop or InDesign. If you want to try something that's a little bit more involved, I do have a series of 5 videos that I've posted on YouTube. You can find them by just typing in David Pounds, Pounds, and Illustrator into the search section there, and you'll learn how to do something like this. I hope you found this helpful, and I'd love to see some examples of your work. Thanks for watching.